Welcome to Suzanne's studio. I'm Suzanne Barnett, your host, and tonight I would like to welcome Hawk Lowden, who was incarcerated for 26 and a half years. Now, Hawk has a brand new life, and he is a Native American Indian, and he has changed from a life of alcohol and drugs to a new world of spirituality and rehabilitation. And I'm just very happy to have Hawk with us. And I really mean that, Hawk. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Suzanne.
So tell us your story.
Okay, first of all, I was conceived on the Hoopa Valley Indian Reservation in Northern California. My father was killed in an automobile accident while my mother was carrying me. So we moved away from the reservation, and my mother married soon after that. A year and a half after that, my sister came along. And she was married for about 2 or 3 years. I remember about 4 years old, there was a divorce. We weren't living in the same house. And it was one day, my stepdad, I thought who was my real father, came to pick up my sister, and I wanted to go too. And as he drove away, I asked my mom, why can't I go with Dad too? And she said, well, I'll stop crying. He's not your real father anyway. So that was kind of the start for me with a lot of issues, with childhood issues, insecurities, and not understanding. I had a little anger and resentment. And soon after that, she remarried. I guess a year after that, she remarried again, my second stepfather. And that was kind of a rough childhood. We never really did get along too good. My stepfather came from a big family. He was the oldest of 10 kids. And he had kind of a rough childhood himself. So when he married my mother, he kind of stepped into a ready-made family, a son and a daughter. He was fresh out of the military, so he didn't, I would think, have a lot of parenting skills. And as a result, there was some, physical and verbal things, abuse there, and I had a lot of resentments and anger about that growing up, about the transition. When I found out that my first stepfather wasn't my real father, and then my next stepfather comes along, and we moved completely away from where we were living to be near his family. So it was kind of strange being, Native American. My mother's Hickory Apache, and my stepfather was Hoopa, on the Hoopa Indian roll. So coming up as a kid with a stepfather who's Irish and German, and he's got 9 brothers and sisters. He's the oldest of 10, going to Thanksgiving, and everyone around me has blonde hair, blue eyes, and I'm the only one that's got dark skin and dark eyes. And it was kind of strange, but I accepted it, and my uncles and everything loved me and treated me okay. So that part was okay, but the dynamics, the relationship that my stepfather and I had, I guess it wasn't everything that I expected, that I wanted. He wasn't really, the kind of father that would spend time with me and take me fishing and do things with me. He was always busy on the road driving truck, and then we had that dynamic in our relationship where it's the verbal and physical abuse as well. So I developed a lot of resentments, and as a result, growing up as a teenager, I started getting in trouble, skipping school, drinking, smoking pot, and running away from home, things like that. And from doing all that, it just made the relationship worse at home. So that when my father came home from driving truck, first thing he hears about is everything that I'd done. He's coming after me, and I'm running away. So that's kind of how my teenage years were. And that lifestyle led me to just continuing to abuse alcohol, drugs, and getting into fights, getting kicked out of school, and eventually landing in prison with a life sentence, 15 years to life. And that's you would think that's where the transformation would start, after someone who's given a life sentence for killing somebody because of drinking and driving. And it took me a long time to come to terms with that. I was in a lot of denial. I was in a lot of denial about my alcohol abuse. I didn't really think I had a problem. I had a lot of issues, internal issues, self-pity. I felt really sorry for myself. I blamed everybody else for my problems and used that as an excuse to justify my lifestyle of drinking and partying and doing whatever I wanted. And I didn't think about anybody else but myself.
Excuse me, why was your life term extended?
Okay, well, when I was first, because of my drinking, I had prior DUIs, so that was used in my case to get me a life sentence. And when I first came into prison, I pretty much had the same attitude that I did on the street. I didn't change. That's why I said you'd think that someone would change once they're handed a life sentence. And I came into prison still blaming everybody else for my problems. If the cops wouldn't have been chasing me, I wouldn't have killed a man, running a stop sign. I would not take responsibility for my actions, and I was in denial, and in denial of all my character flaws. So the first 12 years of my incarceration, I went through my time like that, and having that attitude. And in 2000, I started a life sentence. I actually started doing time I was arrested on June 3rd, 1988, and basically that's where my time started. So for the first 12 years of my sentence, like I said, I still had that attitude, and I was getting into trouble, getting write-ups in prison, just having an attitude, not addressing any of my issues. So on April 8th of 2000, I ended up in a fight in the prison yard, and didn't want to stop fighting, and the officers were yelling for everybody to get down, but we stayed up fighting, and ended up getting shot by a skip round, a rubber bullet, in the back of my leg, and that still didn't stop us. I was fighting two guys at the same time on the yard, until we seen the goon squad, which is the special officers for disturbances, rushing out on the yard towards us. And we all knew that if we continued fighting, that we'd probably have some cracked skulls, or maybe a broken arm, because they'd come in swinging just to put us down. So we went ahead and got down there. And as a result, I was put into solitary confinement. So while I was in solitary confinement, it was able to put me somewhere where I had no contact with anybody or anything. I was shut off from the world, and I had time to really get some clarity and really start thinking about my life. And I believe that it was in solitary confinement where my transformation began, where I finally just surrendered and said, I don't want to be this way anymore. I want to change. I really wanted it with all my heart. And I fell down on that cell floor, and I cried my guts out. Everything that was happening on the outside world that I was helpless over, that I could do nothing about, my baby brother committing suicide, my grandparents dying, my grandmother dying of going through Alzheimer's and passing away, and my mother taking care of her with rheumatoid arthritis, my sister in the hospital in a coma for 30 days. I found my bunkie, my cellmate, about 3 weeks prior to that, he overdosed himself on heroin, committing suicide. So there was a lot of stuff that was going on that I felt so out of control of, as well as my own life. How
long were you in solitary confinement?
I was in there for 6 months.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Solitary confinement is basically what it sounds like. You're in the cell all by yourself. There's nothing in there. There's a mattress, sheet, and a blanket, and they bring the meals through a slot, twice a day. You get your breakfast, and they put a sack lunch in there with your breakfast. And you are able to do a little bit of reading if you can get somebody to swap a book somehow through some way. There's always a way, but it was just really a time of contemplation. You have plenty of time for that.
How did you get through it, Hawk?
Well, like I said, I started out by surrendering and just saying, I don't want to be this way anymore. I need to change, and started thinking about all of my past and everything that happened. And I think there was a spiritual awakening, actually, while I was in there. Because in the past, dealing with my alcohol abuse, there's many times that I told myself, I need to quit, I want to quit. And I might quit for a little while, maybe a month, 2 months, maybe even 6 months, but I always ended up going back to the same thing.
Yeah. And how did you get the alcohol in prison?
Well, there's ways in prison that you can get anything.
Really?
So, yeah, we'll just say that, so.
How? I wish you could tell us that.
Say for instance, if you wanted to make wine, they call it pruno in prison. There's ways of making it. You take fermented fruit, or you take fruit and you ferment it, add sugar and water, and put it in a sealed plastic bag, and eventually it will cook into wine. And
what about the drugs? How do you get those?
Drugs, there's ways to get everything in there. You'd be amazed how anything can be brought into prison, even with the guards themselves bringing it in. So, is it true? I mean, you see all the movies and everything, but is it true that it's a good idea as a prisoner to kiss it up with the guards? I don't know about that. I mean, of course, there's people like that, and I don't want to generalize as far as, the guards and the inmates, because from my experience, there's been some really good human beings who were guards, and same with inmates. Yeah. But there was also some people who weren't that great, who would do things like that. Yeah. Today, I, wouldn't condone that, type of thing, but it was done, and it is done in prisons every day. So how did you get out of prison? Well, I got out of prison, like I said, when I was in solitary confinement, I made the decision that I was going to change. And along with that decision had to come action. Because, like I said, I had decided many times before I was going to quit drinking, but somehow, while I was sitting there in that prison cell, after I cried my guts out on that prison floor, and all the pain and all the anguish and all the anger and all the rage and everything that was inside of me came out on the floor, and I picked myself up. First of all, I felt cleaner, I felt lighter, and there was something else there that I hadn't felt in a long time. And what that was, something inside of me, was just this little seed of hope, that there was hope for me that I could change. After being given a life sentence, the first 12 years of it just continuing the same type of behaviors, landing in solitary confinement, and wondering if I'm ever going to get out of prison, for something happened that day where I believed there was hope that I could change, and I didn't let go of that seed. When I was released from administrative segregation, ADSEG, or the hole, or solitary confinement, I was sent to a different prison. And miraculously, I ended up there was no room for me in any of the cells, so they put me in overflow, which was in a substance abuse program that was a part of the prison structure, and it was a certain building that was just for that program. And the guy that was in the cell happened to be somebody that I knew from my past, and he said, he was a Native American guy too, and he said, I might as well just stay in this program. And I said, you know what, you're right. And so that was kind of my start. I started really looking at myself and being willing to change the things that I needed to do, and being honest with myself and admitting a lot of things that I didn't want to see about myself and admit. My denial about drug and alcohol addictions, my denial about me being a selfish, self-centered person who didn't care about, my denial about running away from facing my responsibilities and what I was really accountable for, and stopping myself from blaming everybody else for my problems, and saying, everything that happened to me in my life, everything that happened, and everybody that hurt, and everybody that was left in the wake of my path of destruction, was because of me. It was, and in the past, everything else was everybody else's problem always. It was never my problem. So that was the biggest part of my transformation, was looking at myself and admitting my flaws and the things that I really needed to look at and work on. Because a lot of those things were the underlying issues and factors that led me to abuse alcohol and drugs in the first place, because of not knowing how to cope with the anger and the resentment and the fear of rejection, all these things that I brought from my childhood. And not to say that I'm using those things to blame for my alcoholism and my drinking, because I chose to drink. I chose that way of life and that lifestyle, and nobody twisted my arm. So I don't want anybody to feel sorry for me about, the time that I did for what I done, because I honestly believe that I got everything I deserved. And my gift of freedom is truly a gift to be out here in this world today. I don't think there's any price that you can pay that you can put on a human life. If someone says, okay, well, he's been in 26 years or 30 years or 50 years, he deserves to be out now. Well, how much years is someone's life worth? So it's not about that. It's about, am I no longer a risk to hurt somebody else again because of my drinking? And the way that I make sure of that is that I don't drink anymore.
What would happen if you went back to drinking, do you think?
I don't even want to think about it.
Yeah.
But I think that I would probably be right back where I started from. I would end up, right back in the bottom of that hole. And one of the things that helps keep me sober and keep me from drinking is honoring the memory of the man that died because I was drinking and driving, and not just that man, but his family. He left a family behind. And understanding that the only way that I can never change the past of what I've done, and I'm always going to carry that guilt and that shame for my past actions. There's nothing I can do to change that, but I can change me, and I can try to be a better, kinder, loving human being and honor his memory by living the best life I can out here today and being a productive member of society. And that's what I try to do every day. And
you have been out of prison, for 14 months?
I was released from prison on October 21st, 2014.
So what have you been doing since then?
Okay, well, when I was first released, I was originally supposed to go up to Redding, California, and go right to work. I had all the plans laid out. Well, God had a different plan. And I got a call. I was found suitable, first of all, by the parole board after 5 times of going to the board, getting 5 denials of different types of denials. But so after going to the board and being found suitable, 2 weeks before my release, I found out I was actually going to be getting out. Because you don't know if you're a lifer in California prison system, if you are found suitable by the parole board, there's also a period of time of review where the parole board themselves actually review the entire hearing, and then they send the case to Sacramento where the governor reviews it. So there's a process, and if the governor decides that he doesn't think that you're fit for release, or that for some reason you're still a threat to society, he can pull the date and you're not going anywhere. So you don't actually know until 2 weeks. So a couple weeks before I was released, my counselor came to my cell door and says, hey, I got some papers for you to sign. And I knew what that meant, that it's real, I'm going to probably be getting out of here. And said I was going to San Francisco, California. And into a program here, which is down in the Tenderloin, and on 111 Taylor Street. And that's the program I went into. So I was there for approximately, almost exactly a year. I started going to school. I actually started working part-time through the Santa Clara an employment department in there. And I was doing jobs up and down the bay in Palo Alto and San Mateo. And then I started talking to somebody, and they said, well, do you have any college education? And I said, well, yeah, well, I was in prison. I was a production coordinator in an upholstery shop, and I worked in that shop for about 11 years. And while I was in the shop, I was also taking college units through independent study. And so I was able to get my English requirements. I was able to get a business certificate, take some courses in psychology and philosophy and ethics. So when I was released to San Francisco, I had about 40 units. So I decided, maybe I'll go back to school. I've always enjoyed learning, and so I enrolled into San Francisco City College in January of 2015 in the spring, and I just graduated this spring, 2016, with a degree in social and behavioral science, associate's degree, and I graduated with high honors. And I will be starting this fall at San Francisco State University. Also, this past semester, during the spring, I took a course at a Stanford University called Project Remade, which is an entrepreneurship program for formerly incarcerated people to help them put together a business plan and actually launch their own business, small business. So I was doing that while the program at Stanford, going commuting out there on Sundays, every other Sunday, and attending City College full-time, and also volunteering in the community for other things. So,
what are your goals right now?
My goals right now, I try to take it one step at a time. So my goals for right now is to enjoy this little bit of the rest of the summer before school starts, and take it one semester at a time and get the best grades I can each semester until I get my bachelor's degree. And then eventually I hope to be able to get my master's degree. If time allows, where I'm staying at and everything works out how I hope it will, I'll be able to do that. And then eventually I have a little property up on the reservation in Hoopaw. Someday I hope to have a ranch up there and open a healing center. For people who are working through whatever type of, maybe a traumatic childhood, drugs, alcohol. They just need some type of place where they can come for a sanctuary and healing. And by then I'll have my degree and be ready to do that.
What have you learned from this experience, from all those years in prison? What do you think you've really learned?
I learned that change is possible. And you can change and you can be free from any addiction. It's just a matter of what are you willing to do? What are you willing to do that? And it takes a lot of humility sometimes and a lot of courage. But I learned that anybody can change and transform if they're willing to do it.
But some people can't do it. They cannot do it. What can you do for them?
All I can say is the same thing I told myself, is don't give up and keep trying. It took a lot for me. I was a hardhead. Like I said, you'd think that somebody who was given a life sentence would want to turn their life around right then and there, but I still hadn't seen the light.
Yeah.
And it took 12 years into a life sentence, being put in solitary confinement, as low as I could possibly go, for me to decide I want to change. You really have to want it. And that's what I would say. I don't know what to tell anybody who is struggling except don't give up.
So that's your mantra, so to speak.
Don't give up and do the best you can with what you have.
Do you think, would you ever consider working with other people that are really on a road to, prison to nowhere? How do you ever think of yourself doing that?
I think in a way that I kind of do that right now. I think that the best way to do that is to start with the youth before they even get on that road, by being a good role model, having the ability to talk to younger people and relate to them and communicate to them where they feel safe and comfortable. So there's actually a couple of young men in San Francisco that I mentor and hang out with, and I don't really necessarily see it as like I'm helping them avoid a life of addiction or alcoholism. I just look at it as being a positive role model to them.
Yeah.
And someone that can be there for them to talk to trust, and do things with.
Yeah. Well, all I can say, Hawk, is that I really appreciate you letting me interview you, and
Thank you.
I just hope and pray that the rest of your life goes smoothly, because you've really had a plate full of an unusual life for all those years. And I really do wish you well, and whatever it takes, I hope that you will stay on those programs.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I know that I still look at myself as a work in progress.
Yeah.
It's just like a garden. You have to continue to care for it to see the fruit.
Right.
If you just neglect it and don't put in the work, that's what you're going to have.
It's not going to work. Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been such
Thank
a
you,
pleasure.
Suzanne. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And I want to thank our crew. You've got a good taste of our crew. They're really dedicated, and we've been together for a long time, and I thank them so much. And of course, I want to thank our audience for watching. I always say this. And I can't wait to see you next time. Bye-bye.